at yung mga ikinikimkim lang namin sa aming mga puso. Para sa kalusugan at rehabilitasyon sa aming mga barangay, laban sa krimen at simplistikong pagpaparusa, at para sa hustisya para sa lahat ng mga biktima, dinggin mo ang aming panalangin. Para sa moderno at rules-based na pagpapatupad ng aming mga batas, paglilinis at muling pagpupuno ng the best and the brightest ng mga hanay ng aming mga institusyon, sa paglaan ng mga rekurso ng pamahalaan at sa pagpapalakas ng public safety sa aming mga pamayanan, dinggin mo ang aming panalangin. Para sa diversity, dangal at karapatang pantao at laban sa diskriminasyon at prejudice, dinggin mo ang aming panalangin. Panginoon, para sa ganitong mga panalangin na aming naibibigkas at yung iba pa na aming ikinikimkim sa aming mga puso, dinggin mo ang aming panalangin, gabayan ang aming mga kalooban at aming mga katawan upang kumilos, upang bigyang daan ang inyong kalooban at ang kabutihan ng karamihan ng aming mga kababayan. Siya nawa.
Amen. Thank you, Senator Ontiveros. The Premier Medical Center Chorale will lead us in the singing of the Philippine National Anthem, and then they will also sing the song entitled Tagumpay Nating Lahat. Maraming salamat po sa Premier Medical Center Coral who came all the way from Cabanatuan, Nueva Ecija. Secretary, please call the roll.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, De Lima, Dulon, Ercito, Escudero, Gatchalian, Gordon, Hunasan, Ontiveros, Lacson, Ligarda, Pacquiao, Pangilinan, Po, Recto, Soto, Trillanes, Villanueva, Villar, Joveri, Senate President Pimentel.
Saan yung iba? 19 lahat? Okay. With 19 senators present, the chair declares the presence of a quorum.
Mr. President,
Majority Leader?
Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the journal of the 57th session, Wednesday, February 1, and consider the same as approved.
Is there an objection to the motion to dispense with the reading of the journal and consider the same as approved? There being none, the motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
Should we correct? Excuse me, sir. Should we correct? 19 or 20? So correction, we had 20 senators at the start of the session. Is there any objection to the motion to proceed with the reference of business? There being none, the motion is approved.
Bills on first reading, Senate Bill number 1312, an act requiring crematories to collect from the decedent's remains biological specimen for DNA sampling and or storage, fingerprints or thumbprints, dental imprints, and digital photos, providing penalties therefore and for other purposes by Senator Pangilinan.
Referred to the Committees on Health and Demography and Local Government.
1313, an act mainstreaming the public health approach to Philippine drug policy, establishing and implementing community-based programs and strategies for drug-related issues and concerns, and prohibiting harmful and discriminatory interventions and practices, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes by Senator Risa Hontiveros.
To the Committees on Health and Demography, Local Government, and Finance.
Resolution, proposed Senate Resolution number 281, directing the Committee on Labor, Employment, and Human Resources Development and other appropriate committees of the Senate to inquire and review and aid of legislation, the employment transition plan prepared by the relevant government agencies in cases of closure of business by Senator Joel Villanueva.
To the Committee on Labor, Employment, and Human Resources Development.
Committee report number 33, prepared and submitted jointly by the Committees on Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship and Civil Service Government Organization and Professional Regulation on Senate Bill number 1311, with Senators Recto, Paula Benigno Bam Aquino IV, Grace Poe, and Subiri as authors thereof is entitled, An Act Establishing a National Policy on the Ease of Doing Business, creating for the purpose the Ease of Doing Business Commission and for other purposes, recommending its approval and substitution of Senate Bill number 866, taking into consideration proposed Senate Resolution number 23 and 74. Sponsors, Senator Subiri.
54.
54.
PS Resolution number 23 and 54. To the calendar for ordinary business. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, to speak on a matter of public interest, may we recognize Senator Lone Legarda.
Is there any objection? There being none, Senator Legarda is recognized to speak on a matter of public interest.
Napunta kayo sa reception. Nag-birthday si Baste.
If there's no objection, session is suspended.
Eh, Baste, sumali ko din. Anak, nasa ka ba? Maaga ako.
Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed. Senator Ligarda has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise on a matter of personal and collective privilege to draw special attention to one of the most basic needs of our existence, yet it is a resource that we have taken for granted: water. Man can live for several weeks without food, but a few days without water would be detrimental to one's health. Our body, after all, is made up of 60 to 70% water. The earth is likewise composed of 2/3 water, and the Philippines, being an archipelago, is surrounded by water. But not all of it is suitable for human consumption. 97% is seawater. There is 3% fresh water. Most of this is frozen, and only 0.5% is the fresh water available for us through aquifers, rainfall, natural lakes, rivers, and reservoir. Given these basic facts, we should all be aware that water is indeed a precious resource. But as one saying goes, and I quote, "We would never know the worth of water till the well is dry." Let us not wait for this to happen, Mr. President. We need to strengthen our water security. There are still 8 million Filipinos who lack access to safe water, and 26.5 million lack access to improved sanitation. 18 million or 18 Filipinos die daily from diarrhea and other waterborne diseases, while 55 Filipinos die daily from diseases caused by lack of proper sewerage and sanitation facilities. Water is vital to achieving food security, as agriculture accounts for 70 to 85% of our water consumption. But water security is not only about the provision of sufficient water for the needs of our people and our economic activities. It is also about having healthy ecosystems and building resilience to water-related disasters, including storms, floods, and droughts. Extreme weather events, such as intense or more frequent rains, the increasing number of hot days, along with weak resource management, are factors that lead to low water security. According to the Asian Water Development Outlook, a joint report by the ADB and the Asia Pacific Water Forum, water insecurity in the region is caused primarily by inappropriate management practices rather than physical scarcity of water. To address this, the AWDO developed a water security framework based on 5 key dimensions for household, economic, urban, environmental, and resilience to water-related disasters. Low water scarcity in these key dimensions can cause economic damage equivalent to up to 2% of our GDP. The Philippines currently scores number 2, or what we call engaged, which means that more than half the people have access to modest drinking water and sanitation facilities. Water service delivery is starting to develop, supporting economic activities. First measures are taken to improve water quality, and first attempts are being made to address water-related risks. Definitely and clearly, we need to do more. For a country that is likely to experience severe water shortage by 2040 due to the combined impact of rapid population growth and climate change, we must give utmost priority to improving our water security. We need to craft a roadmap for sustainable water use and to consolidate all water agencies to address issues such as overlapping and fragmented regulation of water supply services. Last January 20, an interagency meeting for the National Water Summit and Roadmap was convened in Malacanang by this representation together with Environment Secretary Gina Lopez and Dr. Ernesto Ordonez as representative of the private sector. Dr. Ernie is with us today. Using the AWDO key dimensions as guide, the group identified 7 sectors to focus on: household, urban, agriculture, economic, environmental, resilience, and governance. For each sector, the committee identified issues and initial recommendations. In the household sector, among the issues are sewerage, the high incidence of waterborne disease, infrastructure deficiencies, lack of rainwater harvesters, even if there's a law since 1989, the management of water supply, flooding, the contamination of water lines due to drainage problems. In agriculture, Secretary or Senator Pangilinan knows this so well, Senator Villar knows this extremely well, irrigation efficiency and water pollution, such as pesticide leaching, are among the issues raised. To address these, we need to develop water-efficient technology such as crop varieties requiring less water, to operationalize the river basin management, to increase irrigation water productivity, and to improve irrigation governance. For urban water security, challenges include water supply and allocation, flooding, and mixing of sewage water with domestic water. Initial recommendations include the review of current city plans, providing incentives for investors in the urban water collection, the construction of water impoundments and rainwater harvesters, and enhancement of water treatment facilities for industries. For the economic sector, issues on ecotourism, industrial waste, and water as an energy source were raised. It is important that we maintain the integrity of our ecotourism spots to implement payments for environmental services in all major watersheds and to strictly implement the water code. We can also utilize water as an energy source by promoting small water turbines along river systems. Issues raised in environmental water scarcity or security include the deterioration of our rivers and lakes, solid waste management, mine tailings, sedimentation, and erosion, as well as a lack of early warning systems. Last week, Secretary Lopez announced the results of the Department of Environment's mining audit. It is appalling to see degraded forests and polluted watersheds. For many years, these firms operated in the country, and while they may have given employment to some, the cost on our environment is already irreparable. Many of those recommended for closure or suspension have caused the destruction of our functional watersheds. We laud the DNR for taking such bold steps towards implementing our environmental laws. We can further address challenges in environmental water security by enhancing river health through cleanup activities, enforcing the ecological solid waste management law, and the environmental impact assessment plans, implement sediment removal in water impoundments and reservoirs, and enhancing our forecasting systems. To strengthen resilience to water-related disasters, the country needs to evaluate existing programs to combat desertification and to prevent flooding, to improve its evacuation strategies, early warning systems, and disaster risk reduction and management plans. There should be strict water quality monitoring in times of drought, when higher concentration of harmful compounds are observed, and water impoundments, dams, and structural facilities must be evaluated. Capacity building activities for indigenous people must likewise be undertaken so they can adapt to water extremes. In the area of water governance, the issue of having over 30 water agencies has been a challenge because of overlapping mandates and conflicting programs. We need to have a national center for water to coordinate everyone's efforts. For the meantime, a steering committee for planning collaborative workshops towards a comprehensive roadmap for water security needs to be established. There will be several meetings that will culminate in a national water summit where outputs will be discussed. The main goal is to create an integrated water resource management framework, as well as a short-term, medium-term, and long-term strategy and program for the National Master Plan for Water. We still have a lot of work to do, and I enjoin my colleagues in the Senate to give their inputs as well. We can also do consultations in our local communities and with various sectors of society so we know their concerns as well. In conclusion, allow me to quote Dr. Ordonez in one of his commentary pieces as he succinctly describes the water situation. Water significantly affects our lives. When it is everywhere and when it is nowhere, we have serious problems. That is why we need a water master plan so we can control water instead of water controlling us. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Ligarda. Majority Leader.
There are no members who have signified their intention to interpolate, but I was quite interested in some of the points raised by the distinguished lady. So if she will allow, may I be allowed to ask just a very few questions on parts of her privilege speech?
Yes.
Senator Ligarda.
Yes, I'm excited to hear what the Majority Leader has to say.
Well, at the outset, allow me to congratulate the distinguished lady. I truly support the entire purpose and the entire motivation of her privilege speech. You can...
Siguro dun ka, para makita mo ako. Sorry. Ano? Ano?
Thank you. May I remind the distinguished lady that she's no longer my majority leader and I'm not the minority leader anymore, Mr. President. We used to be together in the 11th Congress when she was majority leader and I was minority leader. Senate President was Senator Drilon. We used to bump into each other in this type of interpellations. But nevertheless,
Yes.
as I said, congratulations. It is a well-crafted speech, definitely. I truly support what you said. My curiosity was just awakened by some of the statistics that you mentioned. My issue is on statistics. You said something about 55 Filipinos die daily.
From waterborne disease, no? From waterborne disease.
Waterborne
Yes,
diseases.
from
and
waterborne
then-
disease.
And then there was another number before that.
Yes, waterborne diseases would include dengue. It would include what? Dengue, diarrhea, dysentery.
55 a day.
55 a day, that's accurate, correct?
What was the number before
55.
that? 8, I think, dying of what?
18. The first was 18.
18. Okay, 18 Filipinos die daily of what? Again, Mr. President.
Rachel, dito ko nga. Saan yung kopya ng speech ko? Yes. 55 a day due to waterborne diseases. And this is due to poor water sanitation.
Poor water
Yung mga
sanitation.
nag-iimbak ng tubig.
Right.
Kasi wala naman silang running water source. But they're saving on water, but nadedengge naman because it's stagnant water. And then, some of them, of course, cannot buy bottled water, don't have kangen machines to improve their water source. It comes from the tap, but the tap is contaminated because maybe there's a busted pipe and the groundwater is dirty. therefore, they get infected by the dirty tap water.
And then the 18 who die daily is from what?
I'm looking at my, due to disasters ba ang sabit ko doon? Here, 18 Filipinos die daily.
Of?
Okay. 18 Filipinos die daily from diarrhea and other waterborne diseases, while the 55 who die daily from diseases caused by lack of proper sewerage and sanitation facilities. So, this is actually connected. Those
Yeah.
who die from waterborne diseases and those who die for lack of access to water as well. And the
So,
source
total
of that...
73. And this, yes, I was about to get to that.
water.org.
My next question, Mr. President, Your Honor, is how did you arrive at these statistics? The reason I asked, Mr. President, is because in the 2011 debates on the RH bill, they kept on mentioning that 11 mothers die a day.
Yeah.
In Uganda also, as manifested by Depsec Belien when he was there, they also said 11 mothers die daily. So what I did was, from 2009 and 2010 statistics, I asked nationwide, I had my staff go around and ask for statistics on how many mothers die a day
Yes.
for giving birth, of childbirth. And they arrived at a number coming from the regional hospitals and most of
Yes.
the other hospitals in the provinces. They came up with 8 mothers die a year.
na nga yung hard copy source.
8
source
mothers
is the
died
department-
in 2009 specifically. Only 8 mothers died in the entire year sa childbirth. So I don't know where was the 11 mothers die a day. Now, we're hearing from you that 73 Filipinos die a day, die daily out of poor sanitation. So I want to know where you get those statistics, Mr. President.
These are averages from the Department of Health. I'm telling them to secure the whole study from which this was culled. In fact, in my speech, it is footnoted. It is footnoted, Mr. President. This is not a byproduct of my own study. It was given by UP Los Baños, whose source is the Department of Health. Can I see the... sa laptop. Okay. Saan to? Where was this printed?
Water.org it's the NGO that works here in the Philippines.
Okay. We can email you the whole article. It's the Water and Sanitation Crisis in the Philippines from water.org, and the whole study is here.
Would the article contain how they arrived at those statistics, Mr. President?
These statistics, Mr. President, are averages taken by the Department of Health in the rural areas around the country. In fact, it could even be more than that. This needs to be validated at DOH, but this is part of a study conducted by water.org and UP Los Baños as well. It's everything, all deaths related to water, whether it's dysentery, diarrhea, dehydration, disasters even, floods, droughts, anything related to water. Nandito ba yung number?
So 73 times 365, Mr. President. May I be given by the Secretary?
No, I did that already. 26,645.
More than the EJ case, Mr. President.
26,645.
Yes, Mr. President, here, it says here, out of 101 million Filipinos, 8 million rely on unimproved, unsafe, and unsustainable water sources. And 26.5 million, 1/4 of our population, lack access to improved sanitation. 5.8 million
Yeah.
Filipinos in rural areas, and I've said this before, still practice open defecation. And there are 520,000 cases of waterborne diseases recorded annually. 18 Filipinos die daily from diarrhea and other waterborne diseases, and 55 die daily from diseases caused by lack of proper sewerage and sanitation facilities.
May I have your statistics again, Mr. President? 73 times 365?
26,645.
In
26,645.
water-related
Yes,
deaths.
in 1 year.
Yes, Mr.
So
President.
the extrajudicial killings of 7,000 daw for 6 months, which include also not drug-related deaths, but simple murders and homicides. If you double that, it's only 14,000 for 1 year, ano? So, mas alarming ito
Yes, Mr. President. Can
than
I
the
elaborate?
extrajudicial killings, Mr. President.
It's a silent killer. Families without a safe water source within their home or near their home, they spend so much time collecting water in the nearby barangay, sa kapitbahay, and those without a sanitary toilet facility at home face a number of unattractive choices according to this. They have to go through rice paddies or sugarcane fields. They risk snake bites, robbery, sexual assault. They sometimes hold it until the morning, nagtitiis. Or sometimes suffer the embarrassment of borrowing the neighbor of a toilet of a neighbor. In fact, even if you look at the studies in India, the problem of open defecation leads to murders of young children. Yung mga lalabas pa ng bahay at magtatago sa bukid para magdumi is a cause of many sexual assaults and murders. That also happens in this country, Mr. President. So others defecate in nearby streams, in brooks, in rivers. It contaminates our local water sources. Pag nainom yung mga tubig na yon, let's say upland, tapos merong hinulugang taktak, what do you call it, downstream waterfalls. Yung mga nag-open defecate doon, pagbagsak ng tubig, ayan, marumi na, iinumin, magkakasakit. So, Filipinos consider water and sanitation as connected, and this impacts into the health of people. Probably the study has taken all of this into consideration, and that's why there is that seeming big number.
So I suppose the study would have a master plan on how to be able to resolve this particular problem, Mr. President.
There's a need for a master plan.
No, does it have a master plan, the study?
It is a study in 2014 where they worked with different communities. They surveyed different communities. Well, the master plan, there is a master plan to, it's very general, that they should have sanitation solutions. I mean, we know that already in urban and rural communities. There should be research, trained staff. You should microfinance institutions. I mean, all of these we know already.
Yes,
So
and
we know the problem.
To whom
Yes.
did you submit this master plan, or general master plan?
No, Mr. President. This is a study we quoted in our speech, and I said that there is a need to rationalize our water resource to put together our 30 water agencies lodged in various departments in government. Merong under DNR, merong water agency sa ilalim ng Office of the President, 30 water agencies with duplicating mandates and functions perhaps should be looked at by Civil Service Committee, DBM, and Oo. You can go to the microphone. Yeah, ma'am, maganda. Yes. So, I'm not an expert in this. It's really rationalizing. Senator Villar says, perhaps a bill is in order to rationalize the functions of all these water agencies. I simply wanted to bring it to the attention of the body that there is a water problem. There is water everywhere, but there is no water. We are an archipelago of 30 million hectares of land. But we are an archipelago of more than 200 million, sorry. We have an archipelago land area of 30 million hectares. But our water area, including our EEZ, is actually more than 250 million hectares. So, divided by 30, ilang yan? Times, 3 times 7? We have 7 times more water than our land area. But do we take care of our water?
All right, Mr. President, I will await a
Because there is
proposed...
no master plan, and that's what we want. We are not experts, we are legislators. We want the master plan to come from the water experts. So I'm bringing it to the attention. Bakit ba ang bansang 100 milyon na palaging baha ay sa tag-init ay walang tubig? Napakamahal ng tubig. Bumibili pa ng bottled water, may desalination pa, meron pa mga kangen machine na kamahal-mahal. Bakit ba tayo walang tubig? Eh, ang daming tubig. Bakit ba tagtuyot at walang irigasyon ng mga magsasaka? Eh, ang dami namang tubig. Yun.
Well,
So, yun po ang aking, that's what I want us to sort out within, to craft the policy. And we have 30 water agencies that we fund with MOE and PS and capital outlay in our General Appropriations Act every year. What are all these 30 agencies doing? How much? Actually, I will compute, LBRMO. Sa 30 ahensya, ilang empleyado yan? Anong expertise nila? Magkano ang MOE? Magkano ang mga biyahe abroad? Magkano ang mga summit, conferences, workshops, lakbay-aral? Magkano ang capital outlay? Ano ang ginagawa? Iba-iba.
Yes, Mr.
Diba?
President, kasi nga, tama yung pinupunto ninyo at nakakapagtaka like a country or countries like countries in the Middle East, especially UAE, Saudi
Yes.
Arabia.
Oo.
Wala naman tubig sila
Yung mga
Pero
desierto.
they have, desalination ang ginawa. They were able to resolve their water problems. As a matter of fact, the last time I visited Bahrain, their hotels were complete with everything, including water. Kaya lang yung water nila, yung sa shower, sa kaliwa, hot. Sa kanan, very hot.
And I'm sorry, hindi ko po naintindihan. Ano yun?
Ang faucet na shower sa Middle East, dalawang klase.
Hot at very
Hot at saka very hot. So, you will have to get a pail, a pail, put the water there, and wait for it to cool down before you're able to take a shower or
No,
a
but
bath.
before that, Senator Villar mentioned, and I think Cynthia just came from Israel. Yeah, here's a country with limited land and limited water, but exports their goods, their produce in agriculture. And here we are, an agricultural nation. Kiko knows this best, and Cynthia and all of us weekend farmers. But ilan ba ang ating, of our 100 million population, Senator Kiko, how many farmers? More than half? 40 million?
Well, if you speak of those living in rural areas, that would be nearly half.
But farmers, of those living in rural areas,
Around 11, correct, about
so
12
more than
million
one-tenth of our population are actually farmers,
families.
families.
You only have 20 million families.
So perhaps we would say half of our 100 million population
And-
would be living in rural areas and are farmers.
And if you, with the permission of the two gentlemen,
Go ahead, sir.
the two senators, and if you include labor,
Labor, yes.
the data is 34% of our labor force is agri.
Yes.
But if you include agri-related, it will even reach more than 50% of our employment is directly and indirectly agriculture.
Yes. Thank you for that, Senator Pangilinan.
For those who want to contribute ideas and you want your contribution to be recorded, please speak into the microphone. Otherwise, the records will
Instead
not,
of,
will not bear that
Yes.
you,
Senator
the fact
Villar.
that you shared some ideas.
all right, Mr. President. And also the hecklers, Mr. President, the hecklers should be given a microphone.
Can I
Senator Villar.
interject?
Yes,
I
please.
came from Israel. Because of their technology, they don't believe that you need so much water. What they do is they have a computer and they have aquaponics, so you just put a little water and the vegetable will grow. So it's not anymore the amount of water, but it's how you use your water. And they don't even believe that you need the soil. Oh, they do it in plastic containers without soil.
Yes.
So it's about technology.
Yes.
It's not about having the soil and the water, much water and much soil. It's about technology. That's their belief. So they're very successful in that. They are dubbed as the startup nation because of their technology.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm
Thank you
glad,
very much.
Thank you, Senator Cynthia. In fact, thank you for that. We don't even have to look as far as Israel, but thank you for mentioning that. You know, I discovered there is a small hotel in Pasay, 5 minutes away, that has aquaponics in their wall. Gulay na lechugas at ginagamit aquaponics. Anong pangalan ng hotel? Sela?
Seda.
I bumped in, not Seda, Sela. A newly opened hotel, pinuntahan ko, nandun si Mayor at si Congresswoman Calixto.
Calixto.
Naka-solar roof, ang kanilang pond ay red tilapia, ang kanilang cement wall, aquaponics, na low-tech sila lang gumawa at puro gulay. Sabi ko, sige nga, ang Senado nga dito, yung ating mga cement wall sa labas, baka pwedeng gulay para sa mga empleyado. So, simpleng Filipino technology, sila lang ang gumawa. Pero ang puntos ko lang po, Mr. President, I just wanted the issue of water to be brought into the national consciousness because water and its scarcity already leads to wars. Wars in Africa, wars around the world. And water and climate change are inextricably linked. And water and tensions and wars are inevitable if you don't manage our limited water resources. There is no clear roadmap. There is no master plan. But we have so much water, 250 million hectares. Tama ba ako? 250 million hectares? 250 million hectares? Correct me if I'm wrong. We have 30 million hectares of land, 250 million hectares of water. We have a water code. We have the Clean Water Act. We have 30 water agencies. Ang gagaling. We have all the policies. But are we managing our water and using it for the good of our people? Maybe not. How many Filipinos don't have sanitation facilities and openly defecate? In fact, let's ask the DOH, how much is needed to provide sanitation facilities, wash facilities for our poorest of the poor who don't have sanitation facilities, no toilets? Pagtulungan nating pondohan sa 2018 budget. No one is in charge eh. 30 ahensyang ang mga budget.
May I
Nobody's in charge.
interject, Senator
Of
Lauren?
course, Senator Villar.
We have a project with DOH in connection with the Mandamus to clean Manila Bay.
Yes.
We have a project in Baseco. We're providing 5,000 toilets to 5,000 families in Baseco. We'll do it by batches of 500 toilets. So if we're successful there, maybe we can duplicate the project elsewhere. It's DOH.
5,000 toilets.
Yes,
Very
in
good.
Baseco, because there
This
are
is-
there are 10,000 families in Baseco, 5,000 have no toilet.
Ilan ang walang toilet?
5,000.
So you're
Kalahati.
providing 5,000?
So we're providing, we're just giving them the yung
Toilet
toilet
bowl.
bowl, and then they will build a centralized septic tank for everybody.
Is this a private initiative or
No,
government?
DOH.
Ah, DOH.
Yeah. I appealed to them and they
Good.
agreed to build. So if
Why
we're
don't you
successful
talk to the
there,
Senate President instead
maybe-
of talking to each other, Mr. President?
Mr.
yes,
Senate
yes.
President,
Mr. President.
if we're successful, maybe that can serve as a model for the other
Okay.
communities, because we're doing it to implement the mandamus issued by the Supreme Court
Yes.
on Manila Bay. Okay.
Yes.
To clean Manila Bay.
Okay,
So,
just to clarify.
So they're doing something, except we're just starting.
Oh,
Thank
just
you
to
very
clarify.
much,
No,
Mr.
do not leave yet.
President.
Do not leave yet, Mr. President. We're happy that the Department of Health is fulfilling its mandate of providing wash facilities. If I understand it correctly from the good senator, the DOH is building 5,000 toilets in Baseco that needs 10,000 toilets.
No, 10,000 families, half of them have no toilet.
So the DOH is building.
5,000
Is it
toilets.
incorporated in the 2017 budget?
No, they just got it from their regular budget.
From the regular budget. O kaya naman pala eh. So let's find out from DOH how much more is needed. How many more Basecos do we have around the country? How much is needed? How many more families don't have private toilet facilities? And probably they can get it from the regular budget or include it in their 2018 budget.
Yun, Mr. President, that is the content that we will expect in the master plan that we will await.
Yes.
And also, we will await the copy of the article that the distinguished lady mentioned. We thank her for answering my questions. So let us wash
Forward
away
this.
the discussion, and
Email ni Senator Sol.
Two senators are raising their hands.
I thank the distinguished lady for allowing me.
Thank you. Just
Maybe
so that the
recognize
majority leader, I will just respond to him. I thank him for that. And right now, we will email to you the water.org article, which I quoted in my privileged speech. We will give you a soft and a hard copy of that.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
President.
Mr.
May we
President.
recognize the President.
Senator
Cotton.
Drilon, what's the pleasure of Senator Drilon?
Will the gentle lady yield a few questions, Mr. President?
Certainly, Mr. President.
Go ahead, sir.
Mr.
To the
President,
person who cleaned the Iloilo River.
Oh, yes.
thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, first of all, let me put on record my support for the privileged speech of the gentle lady from Antique, Malabon, Santa, the Philippines. We indeed find the privileged speech very timely. Is the gentle lady aware that there is a World Toilet Summit?
Yes, Mr. President.
Very good.
There was a World Toilet Day even.
I'm sorry?
There was a World Toilet Day.
The World
Is-
Toilet.
Is a World Toilet Summit forthcoming, or done?
Last year there was,
Because there was a World Toilet Day.
yes. And the Philippines was a delegate there. The theme was Happy Toilet, Healthy City.
Healthy
City.
city.
Happy Toilet, Healthy City.
Who was our toilet delegate?
It doesn't say in
There might be a
the
World
internet,
Toilet Day.
but the issues discussed precisely is the public hygiene awareness strategies and gender issues surrounding toilet access, the role of toilets in tourism.
Yes.
It can increase tourism arrival if you have good toilet facilities.
That's
But
true.
it has culminated in the signing of the Kuching Declaration, which stresses the importance of addressing aspects of sanitation ecosystem to achieve sustainable development. The reason I'm raising this is, indeed, management of our water resources is very critical. And I agree with the lady from Malabon. No one is talking about this, as usually happens. But I do recall that in the previous Congress, or Congresses, there was an attempt to
The Water
put
Act.
this, not to water the plants, but
The Water Act.
water.
The
No,
Water Act. Did I file?
Putting up the regulation of water
Thank you.
on a more rational basis, instead of having, I don't know how many agencies involved, so that nobody is involved anymore. But I would endorse the idea of, I don't know, the city committee on environment,
Maybe environment. Mr.
to which
President,
committee if the bill has been filed or refiled, and if so, which committee is this? Because indeed, management of our water resources is critical. And right now, there is no such agency which we can point to as the one.
I refiled the bill.
Oh, you refiled the bill?
Yes. I was one of the authors in the previous Congresses. I think I refiled it, right? Which is in what committee? Environment? I'll check in which committee it was referred. That is the Water Sector Reform Act.
Yes, Water Sector Reform
In
Act.
Public Services Committee. It's in Public Services
We
Committee.
urge whoever is the committee chair and the leadership, the Senate President, to put his weight on this issue, because indeed this is one of the achievements that this Congress can claim, should we succeed in really putting up the infrastructure to take care of our water resources. So again, I thank the gentle lady for yielding the floor for a few manifestations, and a request that we give priority to this issue. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you to the Senate President pro tempore for mentioning the UN World Toilet Day last November 19 and for his interventions.
Senator De Lima? She raised her hand earlier.
Just a manifestation, and then Senator Dick Gordon, Mr. President.
Yes, sir.
I never imagined that water could be so exciting. Very good. Huh?
Thank you, Mr. President. This is not an interpellation, this is merely a manifestation. Not everyone knows this. The right to water, or the right to access clean water,
It's
is
a basic
actually a human right,
human right, yes.
which is, or ought to be, justiciable under our jurisdiction, because right to water is an essential component of the right to life, enshrined in very fundamental international human rights treaties to which the Philippines is a party. So it is as justiciable as the right, for example, to be protected, the right of women to be protected against maternal deaths due to, for example, non-implementation of the RH law. The right against arbitrary killing through EJKs is a basic, non-derogable right which deserves legislative measures. And none of these rights that I mentioned is subordinate or to be subordinated to each other. The right to water is an issue under ESCR, Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, while the EJK is an issue under ICCPR, or the International Convention on the right on civil and political rights, while the right against maternal deaths is essentially an issue against, or an issue under CEDAW, or the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. They all fall under the same plane as basic human rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much for reiterating that the right to clean potable water is a basic human right. Thank you, Senator.
Mr.
De Lima.
President, Senator Gordon was seeking the floor.
Senator Gordon?
Thank you, Mr. President. I wonder if the gentle lady will yield some few questions to reinforce the sponsorship.
Yes, Mr. President, of course, to the Red Cross Chairman.
Mr. President, when we talk about water, and I'm reminded here of in this country of the rhyme of the ancient mariner when they say water, water everywhere, but not a drop to drink. In fact, what is happening in our country today is simply that. We're getting into a point where, for example, in Lingayen, or in the Pangasinan area, water is coming in, and because of too many wells or whatever it is, salt water is taking over the aquifers. Is the gentle lady aware of that?
Not particularly in Lingayen, but it's happening in many places. Yes, Mr. President.
Not only in those areas, but practically in a lot of areas.
Yes.
I wonder if the gentle lady is also aware of the fact, aware of the statistics involving water and toilets, for example. You know, when I was Secretary of Tourism, we brought in the Clean Toilet Act that was referred to by the Clean Toilet Campaign, which was, there was even a contest. And apparently, in the order of things, as you know, in our country, we have a dirty kitchen, but most of the time, the toilets are not properly taken care of. I mean, for that matter, even in the hotel, sometimes it is not well maintained, especially in the public areas. You can go to any public area in this country, in bus stations, and toilets are not well maintained. Probably because, could it be because there is lack of water access to those toilets? Would the gentle lady know?
It could be one of the reasons. Lack of running water would lead to no flushing in toilet, the unavailability of water for washing. But it's also a matter of culture. It's cultural.
Of course, we're all, well, of course, culture is always the culprit, and I agree with you. We've not developed a culture of sanitation or of husbanding our resources, particularly water. We more or less take it for granted all the time. And most people shave, they leave the water running, or when they're brushing their teeth, they leave the water running if there's plenty of water. I'm sure the gentle lady is aware of that. But I wonder if the gentle lady is aware of how many toilets there are in our public schools that are operating.
I don't know the statistics of how many toilets in the DepEd schools. I just know that there is a sore lack of toilet facilities, not just in schools, but also in the rural areas, in private homes.
That's correct. In many of our cities, for example, our gentle lady from Las Piñas already maintained, said that she is operating a program in a place where we also operate in the Red Cross. This is the area in Port area, which is in Baseco. And that is actually a trap. If there is a disaster, a lot of people will die there because there's a cul-de-sac, they can go out in a bottleneck, actually, literally a bottleneck, and they'll be trapped there if something happens. But also they don't have any toilets. And I was flying over the area yesterday, and I always am mesmerized by the fact that so much opportunities can be made, especially in these areas where there are informal settlers in the port area. We're right beside our ICTSI, all the big cranes. There are always a lot of prime land that is occupied by our people, and they don't even have access to water. I'm sure the gentle lady is aware of that. Am I correct?
Yes. We've been to many of those places, and we see the lack of sanitation facilities and the unavailability of running water, potable water.
When I was mayor, in fact, I had to come out with public toilets in Olongapo, especially in the informal settlers areas. But even that, it was quite hard to, we have water, but at times there would be fights. As you say, lack of water causes wars, especially in the desert areas, or for that matter, historically, that has always been a contention.
Yes.
If If you remember Lawrence of Arabia, somebody was shot while taking water in front of Lawrence of Arabia, and he was shot by Omar Sharif because he was taking the water in the desert. Now, I'm not sure that we're approaching that era now, but I guess we just want to point out when I was asking about schools, in the Yolanda area, or for that matter, in Pablo during the typhoons, the Philippine Red Cross always makes sure that we conduct and prepare wash facilities because our kids are always, susceptible to germs or other viruses, and if they don't learn to wash their hands,
Yes.
they would not be able to do anything. They would get sick easily. And that is why a lot of money is invested by the Red Cross, and the International Red Cross as well is supporting us on this matter. Where, as you can take a look at the slide, you can see that we have built so many toilets facilities, including wash facilities, in many of the schools. In Manila especially. Even in Manila, they were astounded at we were astounded at the fact, sometimes it causes embarrassment, that the toilets don't even have water. And when we give them water, they feel very, very grateful. In
Yes.
fact, one lady in Aklan, when we where we invested water facilities, including, we don't build toilets anymore in the Red Cross unless there is a water bidet. Because the budget, the gentle lady is involved with finance, and certainly the budget always comes through her, Mr. President. And I wonder if we're all aware of the fact that our toilets in the schools hardly have any even toilet paper. They don't even have water, and they don't
I
even
use
have
the
toilet
toilets
paper.
in public elementary schools when we crisscross by land the archipelago, and I have not seen a single DepEd elementary school with toilet paper, and most of it have no flush, or if ever, may timba na may tubig, tabo-tabo. Yes.
What we do in the Red Cross, and I'm not doing this to crow over what we do, because we don't do enough. There is so much to do. And yet, we provide to make sure that we raise the standard, because that's what leadership is all about. Raise the standard of behavior, of the culture, so that people will take care of water, people will take care of their toilets because they can get sick on it, and that is why we require water tanks. And not only will we put water tanks, we have to require that water has got to be available so that it will go to the water tank, otherwise it's useless.
Yes.
And that is why I think in the budget, forthcoming budget, I think this must be held in priority, and I'd like to make that point and support you and lead the charge in making sure that all our schools have water facilities. And I'm sure
We will ensure, we will ask, because of what you suggested, we will ask the DepEd and the DOH, the DepEd, to find out of all their schools, elementary or high school, which have toilets and running water in those toilets. They should fix it and provide the water systems. It's actually a no-brainer.
Well,
It's
you
part
can
of
take a
their
look
maintenance.
over there. One lady in Aklan, when I went over there, she was very grateful. She was preparing to transfer. And when she had the toilet with the bidet, she said, "I will no longer leave because I find it so comfortable to relieve myself here." Because she showed me an action which really made me laugh a little bit. But I felt very sad that ang babaw ng kaligayahan natin na pati yung
It's a
toilet
luxury.
facility sa ganyan kulang.
It's a
no?
luxury to some people. In fact,
Yes.
if I may add, Mr. President, based on what Senator Gordon said, if only these DepEd schools had the elevated water collectors or water harvesting.
We
which
have
is-
that. I can show you that here.
I'm glad that's Red Cross. Ibig ko sabihin, ang DepEd, if they just implement that law, 1989 pa, meron silang, then the pipe should go to the flushes, then there will be water all the time, as long as there's rainwater.
In Yolanda alone, Mr. President, we put up 78,000 homes, and all of them have to have toilets. And if they have no access to water, we require water harvesting. And I'm sure they can show it to you. I hope they'll be able to find it. They have a tank and it goes down there and goes back, and there's always water in the toilet that we have, including drainage construction, water tank deployment. You know, these are little creature comforts
Yeah.
that must be provided by a country that claims to be, you know, a very literate country, and a country that will always take umbrage if we're criticized for lack of toilets. I mean, we'll probably be sheepishly looking down because we know it's true. And that is why the speech comes at a very good time, because it is important that we face up to the problem. We always like to build roads because they can be seen. But in reality, you have 105 million people, Filipinos. And if they don't have access to clean water or clean toilets, lalo tayong patay. Di ba? In fact, and I will stretch my argument a little bit. I don't think they can find the water harvesting facility, but let me just show you what happens to how we treat our forests, and in the process lose our farms as well. For example, in Nueva Ecija, we were asked by the Bungabon mayor if they can borrow our payloaders. And that is because of the absence of trees in the range out there. And every time it rains, Your Honor, the mud flow is so bad that it takes over the whole fields. Is somebody out there from our, can my staff take a look at who's over there? So I want to illustrate this point because it's important.
Yeah.
And you know, they could not plant. They could not plant rice. They could not plant corn.
Because it was,
And so it just so happened that we had payloaders and we lent it to them. And there you go. You can see on the left quadrant what we saw when we got there. All mud. And they could not plant. The irrigation was totally out of whack. And because we don't have irrigation, we missed out on 400,000 hectares of areas where there was irrigation, and it's now totally destroyed. And it's a gentle lady, I'm sure she's aware, that if we repaired all these 400,000 hectares of irrigation, we don't have
to import
to
rice.
import rice,
Yes.
because that is tantamount to 2 million metric tons of rice.
Yes.
That means we would be able to feed our people properly. And that is why if they take a look at the slide over there, I wonder if I can prevail upon the pages to turn off the lights a bit, so our Senator Rector and Senator Pangilinan, who are talking intently about something important, can hold hands while they're watching the movie. Just kidding. Just kidding. And that's where you are. See, if you can see that, if you can just take out the mud, and if you can get all, for example, there is talk about moving Muntinlupa to Nueva Ecija, you can actually get all the inmates that are about to go in 6 years to plant trees on the range, provided there's a budget for it to pay them less than minimum wage, so that they can start doing something useful before they go out, and we can avoid the spectacle of our rice granary of the Philippines before, Central Luzon, used to be called the rice granary, having the lands of the farmer totally inundated by mud, and they're helpless against the vicissitudes of nature, because water can also be very destructive, and that is the result.
Yeah.
Thousands of hectares are covered by mud. And look at what happened when we opened up the irrigation. Look at what happened in the next slide. They can now plant corn again
Yes.
after 3 months.
Great.
And water is, again, the important thing about this equation. Because without water, and if you don't fix up the sources of water, you're not going to be able to have self-sufficiency in rice and other food staples.
Very well said.
So having said that, Mr. President, I just would like to cite something that was given to me by my staff. For the information of our colleagues here, UNICEF data toilet to people ratio is 1:55 in the elementary school and 1:93 in high school. Can you imagine if somebody just had a bad meal and they all have, and 93 people trying to crowd into one toilet? And it's even worse when you go to Mindanao. Western Mindanao is 1:300.
Wow.
And worse when you go to ARM. It really is criminal and negligence on the part of our government if we cannot really solve and address this problem. And it's not for form, but for the health of our people and our nutrition as well.
As early as now, could I request the good senator and all of our colleagues to make sure that in our 2018 budget, it would no longer be aspirational, but that the DepEd school buildings, as well as all areas already identified by DOH, but because of lack of government resources in the past, that we will provide for it in the 2018 budget so that that's accomplished.
In fact, I was laying the predicate so that our colleagues will know the urgency of the problem. And certainly, I'm sure everybody, the majority floor leader, everybody here is going to support that. And I think nothing is better than the actual bills that we are going to propose to ensure that the DepEd will be provided with the wherewithal to provide water tanks, etc. And you'd be surprised, Mr. President, that when you go to some of these schools where we put in toilets, or for that matter, houses where we put in toilets, they take very good care of it because it represents a dramatic change in their lives. Running water at home or running water in a school gives them, a lot more incentives to go back to school and be safe at the same time. So it's important that we address this, and I will no longer tax the patience of the Senate. I would just like to thank, and I'd like to join my good friend, the gentle lady from all over the Philippines, Loren, for her advocacy here, and please count me in as one of the adherents in this advocacy. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you for your very wise, helpful interventions.
Thank you. Mr. President, I move to refer the privileged speech of Senator Legarda to the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources.
Is there any objection to the motion? There being none,
Senate-
motion. Is there an objection? Senator Pangilinan? No. Senator Pangilinan, yes, before I
It's the
process.
motion and secondarily to the Committee on Agriculture.
Secondarily to the Committee on Agriculture, Mr. President, I accept the amendment.
So the motion has been amended, and the motion is like this, that the privileged speech of Senator Legarda be referred to the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources, as well as to the Committee on Agriculture. Any objection? There being none, the motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just as a manifestation from the Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs, we'd like to place on record that Senator Gringo Nasan and Senator Grace Poe are vice chairmen of Senator Ping Lacson in the Committee on Public Order, Mr. President.
So the manifestation is hereby noted.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the permission of the body, I move to resume consideration of Senate Bill 1108 under Committee Report Number 32.
Is there any objection to the motion? There being none, we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 1108.
Mr. President, last week we started with the sponsorship of Senate Bill 1108, amendment to the Omnibus Election Code. However, we still have another senator who intends to deliver a co-sponsorship speech on the measure. So I move to recognize the principal author of the measure, Senator J.V. Ejercito, for his co-sponsorship speech.
Any objection? There being none, Senator Ejercito is recognized.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, this afternoon I rise to co-sponsor a measure that aspires to live out the role of Congress in preserving the sanctity of votes and the secrecy of the ballots, and in general, protecting the right of suffrage of the people. Today I am pushing for the passage of Senate Bill number 1108 under Committee Report number 32. This measure seeks to amend certain provisions of the Omnibus Election Code and the Voters Registration Act. Before I start, I would like to commend and thank the good chair of the Committee on Electoral Reforms and People's Participation, Senator Laila de Lima, for giving preference to this measure. It is but right to consider this bill early as a contingency measure for possible violations of election laws during the barangay and Sangguniang Kabataan elections this October and the midterm elections in 2019. Thank you, ma'am, for prioritizing this measure. The cornerstone of a democratic and republican framework like what we have in this country is the electoral process by which people are given the opportunity to express their will on who they want as leaders. In the words of Justice Velasco, in the democratic system of government, the people's voice is sovereign. Corollarily, choosing through the ballots, the men and women who are to govern the country is perhaps the highest exercise of democracy. It is thus the interest of the state to ensure honest, credible, and peaceful elections where the sanctity of the votes and the secrecy of the ballots are safeguarded. Where the will of the electorate is not frustrated or undermined, for in the popular will itself is subverted by election irregularities, then the insidious seeds of doubt are sown and the ideal of a peaceful and smooth transition of power is placed in jeopardy. Despite the laws and regulations in place to ensure fair and honest elections, certain people have not been dissuaded in their attempts to manipulate the election results. In most elections, allegations of massive fraud, issues of vote buying, and violations of other election offenses are frequently raised in the media. Based on the report of the Commission on Election, the top election law violations based on complaints filed in 2010 include threats, intimidation, terrorism, use of fraudulent device, and other forms of coercion, vote buying and selling, transfer of officers and employees in the civil service within the election period, intervention of public officers and employees, and problems in the content of certificate of candidacy. Just last May election, Mr. President, I have observed and read in the news the vile schemes on how election offenses were committed by certain individuals, elective officials, officers of the law, and unfortunately even officers of the Commission on Election. For these reasons, Mr. President, I filed Senate Bill number 1108. It is my fervent hope that the increase in penalty for the violation of election laws will serve as a deterrent to those who regard the sanctity of ballots. The proposed measure includes as persons criminally liable for election-related violations the members of the Board of Election Inspectors, Board of Canvassers, and the officials of the Commission on Elections. In addition, the bill proposed to increase the penalty for violation of election offenses from not less than 1 year to more than 6 years, to not less than 6 years and 1 day, but not more than 12 years. I cannot agree more with our chairperson, Committee on Electoral Reforms and People's Participation, Senator De Lima, that the increase in penalty would result to more prosecution of election offenses. This is so because the witnesses will no longer be intimidated and hesitant to report violations of election law since they can avail the benefits of the Witness Protection, Security, and Benefit Act. Other amendments contained in the proposed bill include steps to thwart and to stop off evil plans during elections. Let this proposed bill be our next move to be close to our dream of a transparent and honest election. Let us promote free, orderly, and honest elections to preserve the sanctity of the right to vote by providing stiffer penalties to those who attempt to manipulate the result of our elections. Mr. President and dear colleagues, in light of the foregoing, I appeal to this august body for the passage of this bill. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you. Senator Ejercito.
Thank you, Mr. President. To give time to the other members to study the proposed measure, I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1108 under Committee Report number 32.
Is there an objection? There being none, motion is approved.
With the permission of the Chamber, I move to resume consideration of Senate Bill 1271 under Committee Report number 17.
Is there any objection? There being none, we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 1271 under Committee Report number 17.
This is the proposed measure on the Anti-Discrimination Act. Parliamentary status of the measure is we are not in the period of interpellation. So I move to recognize the sponsor, Chairman of the Committee on Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality, Senator Risa Antoveros, and to interpellate Senator Laila de Lima.
The sponsor, Senator Ontiveros, is recognized, and to interpolate, Senator De Lima is also recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President, the very esteemed sponsor. I'd like to commend the good sponsor for coming up with this proposed measure. I do believe that if this bill is enacted into law, it will be an important legislation because it will expressly recognize the right of individuals with diverse sexual orientation and gender identity and expression to legal equality, which is, again, a fundamental human right under human rights treaties, beginning with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It will also provide a legislative clarity to the rights of individuals with diverse sexual orientation, or the LGBTs, as highlighted in the case of Ang Ladlad versus Comelec. So just a few questions, beginning first with the title.
Mr. President, good gentlewoman, at the outset, I would like to thank my sister in the Senate for the spirit of support she has expressed for this bill, especially because one thing I would like to affirm at the outset of this interpellation, Mr. President, is that people should not be discriminated against because of who they love. So a very timely reminder to us on the eve of Valentine's Day. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, I was referring to the title, Mr. President. The current title of the proposed measure is an act prohibiting discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, or the acronym SOGI, and providing penalties therefore. As a premise for my question on the title, Mr. President, the Philippine LGBT Hate Crime Watch has provided the statistics that may be found online that there are around 164 cases of murdered LGBTs in the country between 1996 to 2012. Now, might the good senator be aware that adults as well as children experience harassment or bullying, and that the Psychological Association of the Philippines itself recognizes this phenomenon?
Yes, Mr. President. The hate crimes, one of which, another statistic of which is that from the 2014 Philippines Country Report on being LGBT in Asia, which
Yes.
noted that 28 persons were killed because of their sexual identities just in the year 2011. These hate crimes of killing are among the worst forms of discrimination against people of diverse sexual orientation and gender identity, especially LGBTs. But yes, the phenomena that the good gentlewoman referred to of harassment and bullying in various settings, including schools, workplaces, and others, also constitute forms of discrimination against LGBTs and, in fact, all individuals of whatever sexual orientation and gender identity or expression through the passage, hopefully, of this bill.
In relation to that, there is this statement from the Psychological Association of the Philippines. This was published in the Philippine Journal of Psychology way back in 2011, and I quote, "Lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender Filipinos continue to experience stigma, prejudice, and discrimination in Philippine society. This stigma is manifested in actions such as bullying, teasing, and harassment of LGBT children and adolescents in families, schools, and communities," end of quote. Now, Mr. President, while Republic Act number 10627, or the Anti-Bullying Act of 2013, addresses the issue of bullying in elementary and secondary schools, then we have to also look at this phenomenon of bullying at societal outcome, the bigger picture of our laws. Now, the principal author, very good Senator Riza, is a human rights advocate herself, takes strong consideration of the lifelong impact of discrimination, not only against direct victims, the LGBTs, but also against and upon their families and loved ones. So while the direct victims are the LGBTs themselves, then the hurt is also felt by the families and loved ones of these bullied LGBTs. With the end in view that our laws should be clear, succinct, and categorical, would the good sponsor consider an amendment to the title of the bill to reflect the direct rights holders of our proposed legislation? The rights holders being the very individuals with diverse sexual orientation. So in the proper period of amendments, would the good sponsor be amenable?
First of all, Mr. President, I thank the good gentlewoman for pointing out that discrimination against people of diverse sexual orientation and gender identity or expression can in fact begin at the very early childhood stages of life, leave a lasting trauma on the young person and his or her families. We have cases here in the education sector, even later in life at the higher education level. Cases, for example, involving Hender Hersho, a transgender student of UP Diliman who protested when her French teacher refused to address her as a female because the teacher said it is against her religious beliefs. Or in another case, against Hart Dino, the first openly transgender chairperson of the University Student Council of UP Diliman, who recalled being told to sign a gentleman's policy. This was in a private school, a so-called gentleman's policy, which was a contract that prohibited LGBTs from, quote, screaming or putting on makeup, close quote, to any stage in the life cycle of an individual of individuals of diverse sexual orientation and gender identity or expression, which are richly documented in terms of the economic costs of homophobia. And if the good gentlewoman is interested, I could share more about this later. But to the direct question, I would be very open to considering a proposed amendment to the title, Mr. President, during the period of interpellation. And I thank the good gentlewoman for hinting that her proposed new title would identify explicitly the rights holders. I think that is a wonderful idea. And doubly, I thank her, Mr. President, for not limiting the rights holders in this proposed law to LGBT. Although the LGBT in the Philippines, as in other countries, primarily bear the brunt of sexual orientation and gender identity or expression discrimination. But thank you, good gentlewoman, that, Mr. President, she referred to individuals of diverse sexual orientations and gender identities or expressions.
Thank you. And we thank the good sponsor for citing actual incidents of discrimination against individuals with diverse sexual orientation. I'd like to see the list that the good sponsor has collated, which makes it all the more imperative for us to further provide legislation to protect individuals with diverse sexual orientation. Next point.
Mr. President, just to quickly respond to the last comment of the good gentlewoman, I would be very glad to provide her the cases of discrimination. It is just a short list that I have here this afternoon, but part of the comprehensive documentation of gender equality advocates in the Philippines. Of course, perhaps the most traumatic for our whole country, the case of Jennifer Laude. And then cases of denial of entry to establishments, for example, involving television personality Inday Garutay in a fine dining restaurant in Pasig City, and similarly, Bibi Gandanghari. And in terms of discrimination in employment, Mr. President, in some recruitment processes, trans women are told to cut their hair short and dress in men's clothes if they want to get the job they're applying for. So these are, aside from the cases I mentioned earlier, I would be very glad to give the gentlewoman.
Thank you very much. And you just mentioned clothes. And that brings me to the second point. I'd like to tackle the issue or the matter of cross-dressing, or the circumstance whereby a person born male and who identifies herself, let me use the term because that is a recognition of their human right to gender identity.
Thank you, Mr.
Born
President.
physically male but would prefer to be called she, her, etc., prefers to wear clothing that is commonly known as ladies' apparel. May we know the viewpoint of the good sponsor as to cross-dressing? Would this fall within the contemplation of the proposed measure, as may perhaps fall under any of the prohibited acts that is enumerated in the bill?
Yes, Mr. President, prohibitions against cross-dressing in principle would fall under the prohibited acts of this bill for at least two reasons at the outset, Mr. President. In the definition of terms of the bill, gender identity refers to the personal sense of identity or expression as characterized, among others, by manners of clothing, inclinations, and behavior in relation to masculine or feminine conventions. Additionally, Mr. President, gender expression, which is another of the key concepts that this bill seeks to enshrine in Philippine law, gender expression refers to the outward manifestations of the cultural traits that enable a person to identify as male or female according to patterns that at a particular moment in history a given society defines as gender appropriate. And this may also embrace manners of clothing. Lastly, at this point, Mr. President, perhaps the good gentlewoman is also aware that one of the concerns raised about the sexual orientation and gender identity and expression bill is how it will relate to the issue of school uniforms.
Yes.
Yes, Mr.
I
President.
was about to mention
Yes,
the
Mr.
examples
President.
of schools or
Yes.
universities.
And precisely, schools are one of the places or one of the institutions where we would challenge our social institutions to step up to the equal value and dignity of every person and to step up in terms of eliminating discrimination. In relation to school uniforms, Mr. President, this bill is a human rights legislation that addresses the historical prejudice against LGBTIQs. It's time to remove our gender-insensitive rules that have been contributing to the systemic homophobia, transphobia, and stigma. If a rule or a policy in an educational institution, or for that matter, workplace or establishment, will devalue the dignity of another human being, it should be declared discriminatory and should be proscribed. So finally, we need to remind schools and the other institutions and persons in authority there that uniforms, for example, are done to identify to the institution one belongs to. These regulations are not imposed, are not supposed to be imposed to promote gender binaries. It's time to challenge these rules and policies, and this bill requires them to be at least SOGI sensitive.
I had to raise that because
Yes, Mr.
school
President.
uniforms as an example. Yes, meron po tayong mga eskwelahan o mga universidad na katulad po ng Far Eastern University na pinapayagan yung mga estudyante to cross-dress.
Opo.
But I don't know whether that is more of an exception to the general rule insofar as the level of tolerance that our educational institutions currently have in relation to the issue of cross-dressing. So it's very good to learn from the good sponsor that this bill, in fact, would contemplate violations insofar as schools and universities making or imposing express prohibition against cross-dressing. It may fall under any of these prohibitions, although I would certainly try to propose a clearer provision in that article or section on the prohibited acts relative to cross-dressing.
Mr. President, I would appreciate that suggestion and thank the gentlewoman for pointing out the good example of FEU as perhaps one example of programs to promote non-discrimination and diversity, particularly diversity programs and policies, within which all government agencies, government-owned and controlled corporations, private companies, public and private educational institutions, and other entities shall establish diversity programs to ensure human rights violations and violence on the basis of SOGI are prevented.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Senator Legarda.
Yes, I know that the lady, Senator De Lima, has the floor. I just have to leave the floor because of another meeting in the office. I simply wanted to commit my wholehearted support to this long-delayed measure so that the Philippines can be in the forefront of protecting the rights of our
Individuals with diverse
individuals of diverse
sexual orientation.
Sexual orientation. Yes, I think it should also include the way we deal with them in media. Does the bill include that? The way they are projected in television programs, in radio, the way they are mentioned in print and online as well, sometimes mocked. I will have my chance to interpolate. I just was so interested hearing the discussions of our colleagues, and I think this was actually included in a bill I had in my second term, but it was limited to discrimination against ethnicity, and there was a amendment of then Senator Miriam Santiago to include discrimination against gender and identity. Yes, so I just wanted to convey this support to our sponsor.
Thank you so much, Mr. President, to my kasimanwa from Panay Island for her renewed expression of support for the bill, and I look forward to discussing with her how to pass both this sexual orientation and gender identity and expression specific anti-discrimination bill, and also a more comprehensive bill addressing various types of discrimination, passing them separately so that they can complement each other in a package of anti-discrimination measures.
Thank you to Senator De Lima for yielding the floor. But yes, siguro wag nating ihalo yung ethnic discrimination, pero importante bigyan ng halaga na walang gender identity discrimination sa salita, sa gawa, sa polisiya, at maging bukas ang kaisipan ng mga institusyon, ng pamahalaan at ng pribadong sektor sa pagtrato sa mga at respetuhin ang ating gender identity na mga kaiba sa atin.
Maraming
Thank you.
salamat, Mr. President. Pati din sa affirmation ng good gentlewoman from Panay Island dun sa kawastuhan ng strategiya na ipasa natin magkakahiwalay pero complementarily yung iba't ibang basis na anti-discrimination measures. At particular dun po sa concern na ni-raise nila, sa Section 5A nga po ng bill natin, it shall be unlawful to promote stigma in media. So inaasahan ko po yung marami at mayamang payo ng gentlewoman na alam po natin ay isa sa pinaka may maiaambag mula sa perspektibang iyan.
Thank you.
May I proceed, Mr. President?
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Let's proceed to the redress mechanisms. I'm always concerned about redress mechanisms because what's the point of laying down all policies about this and also what constitute prohibited acts if there is no sufficient and effective redress mechanisms for violation of any of these provisions. This representation is, of course, cognizant that at least for women with diverse sexual orientation, we have Republic Act 9710, or the Magna Carta of women, that encompass all human rights of women. However, and I'm aware of this as a former CHR chairperson, there are instances when men with diverse sexual orientation are without clear recourse or direction in the application for reliefs when there are breaches of their rights as members of sexual minorities. Mr. President, would this bill ensure that perhaps until CHR has its own charter, something that I've been pushing, hopefully this time around becomes a reality, it should have its own charter because of its sweeping constitutional mandate to protect all human rights of all Filipinos. Is it clear to us under this proposed measure that men with diverse SOGI can access CHR in its capacity as gender ombud in investigating violations of the proposed measure?
Yes, Mr. President. At the outset, I certainly join the good gentlewoman in her desire to pass into law also the CHR Charter Bill. I confirm that the intent of this bill is indeed to also provide redress mechanisms for SOGI-related cases for men. It is also consistent with the good gentlewoman's earlier intention to propose an amendment which will explicitly identify the rights holders, not limited to LGBTs alone, not limited to women alone, but also to include all individuals, including men of diverse sexual orientation and gender identity and expression. And institutionally, Mr. President, we could contemplate that the inclusion of SOGI concerns, for example, in all PNP stations, could be through the expansion of the current women and children desks into, in fact, women, children, and gender rights protection desks.
That's good.
Open, yes, Mr. President, open to the approach of all individuals of whatever sexual orientation and gender identity and expression who might seek redress of grievances, their grievances. And this would all be in the spirit, Mr. President, of what is promised by the Gender and Development Act.
Thank you. And perhaps still on its role as gender ombud in relation to individuals with diverse sexual orientation, since there have been reported cases of murder and physical violence against LGBTs, perhaps we can consider tasking CHR to develop a database on breaches of human rights of LGBTs.
Yes, Mr. President. I would be very open to suggestions of the good gentlewoman how to further expand the formulation of the current Section 9 on redress mechanisms for SOGI-related cases. Letter D, role of the Commission on Human Rights. The third paragraph, which provides, as of now, that the CHR shall also document cases of discrimination on the basis of SOGI and shall include these documented cases in its annual human rights report. And I would be very open to the idea expressed by the good gentlewoman that these would be included not only in the annual human rights reports, but in continuing, continuing database of the Commission.
Let's go please to the funding.
Yes.
The current legal basis for funding requirement on Gender and Development Plan is RA 7192, or the Women in Development and Nation Building. And we are aware that we now have the GAD budget. So would this proposed measure consider also tapping the GAD budget for programs under this proposed legislation?
Yes, Mr. President, that is what is contemplated by this bill, that the current GAD budget in a sense, embrace not only what is commonly known now, that this should embrace women's rights and women's gender equality programs, but all individuals of various sexual orientations and gender identities and expressions. The bill, particularly in Section 11, also contemplates the creation of a Congressional Oversight Committee, which will be referred to as the Anti-Discrimination Oversight Committee, which within 3 years after the enactment of this act will conduct an audit of national and local policies that discriminate on the basis of SOGI. Part of the oversight, or the audit rather, Mr. President, could be on how optimally and well the GAD budget has also been spent in order to promote gender sensitivity, gender equality, and eliminate discrimination as contemplated by this bill. And the Anti-Discrimination Oversight Committee is contemplated to cease to exist 6 years after its organization. The hope expressed in this provision, in this section of the bill, is that within 6 years, we will have identified the best practices in terms of spending the GAD budget, also for the implementation of this bill and the achievement of its objectives, and that after 6 years, the spirit and the letter of this law will have been internalized and institutionalized in the different public and private institutions of our society.
Thank you, Mr. President. For my final query, how would the good sponsor, or how would the committee address or respond to the possible objections to this proposed measure on the basis of religion?
Yes. Yes, Mr. President. I am aware that there are concerns also, for example, about allegedly violating the right to religious freedom. And I would like to affirm that human rights protection does not negate the exercise of religious freedom. It was, in fact, Mr. President, CBCP President Archbishop Socrates Villegas himself who said that passing an anti-discrimination law is going to be a gesture of charity, or in the Christian language, a gesture of love. In the same statement he issued on 3rd March 2015, the Archbishop urged priests to care for all, including the LGBT community. He warned parents against imbuing in children hate against LGBTs, and he instructed Catholic schools specifically to implement a zero-tolerance policy against bullying, which the good gentlewoman raised earlier, against bullying of gender non-conforming students. So in that statement of the good Archbishop, he already, as if presages some of the measures contemplated by this bill to in terms of programs to promote non-discrimination and diversity. And lastly, discrimination, according to the Archbishop, he said, does not conform to Pope Francis's vision of the Church as the sacrament or the sign of divine mercy and compassion, to which Pope Francis dedicated the whole of year 2016 as the year of mercy. The Archbishop said it is contrary to the gospel spirit. Verbal and physical violence against LGBTs, the Archbishop said, is an offense against God himself. So these are statements direct from the leader of the Catholic Bishops' Conference in our country, which would demonstrate that the bill is not contradictory to, but on all of these counts, consistent with what the Catholic Church also preaches.
We actually do not see any objection from the Catholic Church, especially so that it is coming from the Pope Francis himself. Pope Francis has been assuring that transsexuals and homosexuals are accepted and embraced by the Catholic Church, but other religions would not have the same level of tolerance, and we should be able to respond and address any such objection that would be raised by any other religious sects because of the freedom of religion, although the good sponsor has so eloquently articulated on that aspect. So I thank the good sponsor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
her
Thank you very much to the
answers.
good
Thank you.
gentlewoman. Salamat po.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. There are other members who have scheduled interpellation, so I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1271 under Committee Report Number 17.
Any objection? Hearing none. Consideration of Senate Bill number 1271 under Committee Report number 17 is hereby suspended.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to resume consideration of Senate Bill 1304 under Committee Report Number 28.
Any objection? Hearing none. Consideration of the measure is in order.
Mr. President, this is the proposed measure on Free Higher Education for All Act. Parliamentary status of the measure is that we're in the period of interpellation. I move to recognize the sponsor, Chairman of the Committee on Education, Arts and Culture, Senator Bob Aquino, and scheduled to interpellate are Senators Hontiveros, Lacson, and Recto. Senator Hontiveros is withdrawing the schedule, so it will be Senator Lacson and Recto. So in the meantime, I move to suspend the session to allow Senator Aquino to join us in the session hall, Mr. President. Move to suspend.
Suspended.
Mr. President, we're ready to resume.
Session resumed.
Mr. President, I am told that Senator Bamakino, the interpellators of Senator Bamakino will be interpellating tomorrow and Wednesday. So I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1304 under Committee Report Number 28.
Consideration of Senate Bill 1304 and Committee Report number 28 is hereby suspended.
Thank you. Okay daw, Sir Al? Yes, sir. So, Mr. President, I move to resume consideration of Senate Bill 1233 under Committee Report Number 8.
Consideration of Senate Bill 1233 under Committee Report number 8 is in order.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the measure on creating the Coconut Farmers and Industry Trust Fund. Parliamentary status of the measure is that we're still in the period of interpellation. So may we move to recognize the sponsor, Senator Francis Pangilinan, and the Chairman of the Committee on Agriculture, and to interpellate the Minority Leader, Senator Ralph Recto.
Senator Pangilinan is recognized and to avail of the period of interpellation, Senator Recto. In the meantime, with the permission of the Chamber, we suspend the session for 1 minute.
Kumusta? Kailan yung sunog? Ano yung sinasabi itong nagkaroon ng sunog?
Yes, sir.
We're ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, the gentlemen are ready. Senator Pangilinan and the Minority Leader, Senator Recto.
The gentlemen on the floor are once more recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Majority.
Mr. President, we left out, let me begin where we left out. Last week, we started the interpellations on this bill, and we were discussing the brief history, maybe not so brief, but the history of the Coco Levy Fund, when was it first created. And the first law creating the Coco Levy Fund was in 1971. Is that correct, Mr. President?
Yes, RA 6260.
In June of 1971. And could the proponent of this bill explain the nature of this levy? It was collected from whom? Based on Republic Act 6260.
It was imposed, the first levy was imposed on the, well, on the coconut farmers, Mr. President.
Okay.
The levies collected from the coconut farmers, from which they were issued cocoa fund receipts to be converted into shares of stock, which were used also to establish the Coconut Investment Fund.
Okay. So this is the first time that the Coconut Investment Fund was established and the Coconut Investment Company.
That's correct.
Okay. And how much was collected by this Republic Act?
According to the PCGG and the PCA and the COA, 158 million pesos was the amount collected under RA 6260.
And this run from 1971 until, How many years?
1971 to 1981.
so for a decade.
Yes.
Okay, and this is the 55 centavos for every 100 kilo of copra.
That is correct, 55 centavos.
Okay. How is this broken down as well, Mr. President?
It was broken down as follows: 50 cents. Where is that? There. 50 cents will be allocated to the CIF, which shall be used exclusively to pay the subscription by the Philippine government for and behalf of the coconut farmers to the capital of CIC. And then 0.03 centavos, 0.02 will be allocated for the maintenance and operation of the recognized National Association of Coconut Producers, and 0.03 was allocated to PhilCoA for administrative expenses.
And PhilCoA,
It was originally PhilCoA, and then it became the PCA.
but not yet in this Republic Act.
Not
so the
yet.
existing then was PhilCoA.
That is correct.
And PhilCoA stands for?
Philippine Coconut Administration.
Okay.
Philippine Coconut Administration.
And the reason for this levy imposed on the coconut farmers was for?
To accelerate the development of the coconut industry.
Okay. So the national government got involved with the coconut industry.
Yes, by way
This
of
is
the
the
levy.
first time
Yes.
that they get involved. Okay. And you mentioned that they collected this from farmers.
Yes, that's correct.
And how was it collected, Mr. President, from the farmers? Sorry?
How was it collected? May I have a minute suspension? Ma'am. We have our PCA
1 minute
historian.
suspension.
From the, no, from the...
Bago pa lang.
No, yung
Si Dick ba?
isa-isa muna. Yung from the coconut farmers, how is it collected? Do you know? Yes, but where is that collected? In the
It was ACC, FMD, BPN.
Yes, but the Philcoa was the collection agent. So how did he collect? Every state. So saan siya? Nasa Philcoa niya. But how? The question is, he knows that it's collected where? How is it collected? Farm gate ba yun? Saan binibenta ng farm gate? Kanino niya? Kasi ibibili nila, no? Di ba? Pwede ba? Yeah. Yung isa. Ay, yung direct. How did they do that?
Wala eh.
Ready to resume, Mr. President. Collection agent yung Philcoa. Sa kanila. Later on, but itong original. Yes.
Session is resumed.
Yes, Mr. President, just very quickly, we will try to find the actual process by which it was collected, but based on the law, the collection agent was the Philcoa. So we will try to get the actual process of how it is collected. We assume it's collected when it is prior to it being brought to the mills. The Philcoa would have its representative and would be part of the process of weighing the copra collected, the coconut collected, and there issue the receipts. But again, we will get the actual. We will try to secure the actual procedure by which the Philcoa undertook this as collection agent.
In that case, Mr. President, with the indulgence of the chairman of the Committee on Agriculture, Senator Pangilinan, and also the minority leader, may I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1233 under Committee Report Number 8 and schedule it for tomorrow after the sponsorship speeches?
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration of Senate Bill 1233 under Committee Report Number 8 be suspended.
With the understanding, Mr. President, that Senators Recto and Senator Gordon, if I'm not mistaken, will be interpolating us tomorrow.
Yes,
That's
Mr.
correct.
President.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, Senator Recto.
Probably it will take maybe a month before Senator Gordon will start interpolating because I suppose it will be taking a month or more.
Well, that makes it already 2 months between you
Whatever it
and...
takes, Mr. President.
Precisely.
All right.
Whatever it takes.
But
Thank you very
hopefully
much.
Sooner, Mr. President,
Yes.
rather than later.
Sige.
We'll schedule it tomorrow, Mr. President, for sure. Now, after we have suspended consideration, Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the additional reference of business.
The Secretary will read the additional reference of business.
Resolution number 282, resolution directing the appropriate Senate committee to conduct an inquiry into the Amnesty International report that drug-related killings appear to have been extrajudicial executions in the government's war against drugs, with the end in view of enacting legislative measures to address the same. Senator Escudero.
Committee on Justice and Human Rights.
Committee report number 34, prepared and submitted by the Committee on Foreign Relations on proposed Senate Resolution number 283, entitled Resolution Concurring in the Ratification of the Agreement between Japan and the Republic of the Philippines on Social Security, recommending its approval without amendment. Senators Cayetano and Drilon.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move to transfer from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders. PS Resolution 283, under Committee Report number 34.
Any objection? Hearing none. Proposed Senate Resolution 283 and the Committee Report 34 is hereby transferred from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders.
With the permission of the Chamber, Mr. President, I move to consider PS Resolution 283 under Committee Report number 34.
Consideration of the measure is in order.
May we ask the Secretary to read the title of the measure, Mr. President?
Secretary will read the title of the measure.
Resolution concurring in the ratification of the agreement between Japan and the Republic of the Philippines on Social Security.
Sino?
Sherwin? Huh?
Sino mag... Sani?
Sonny?
1 minute
Mr. President.
suspension. 1 minute suspension.
Tapos yung sponsorship niya, John Dyer.
Session is resumed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before the suspension, we have on the floor PS Resolution 283. So to sponsor the measure, may we ask the Senate President Pro Tem, Senator Franklin Drilon, be recognized to sponsor.
Senator Dulon is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Majority Leader. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, good afternoon. In this era of global integration, we are witnessing a period of massive and dynamic migration of Philippine labor. To date, there are over 10,240,000 overseas Filipinos around the world who embrace the abundant employment opportunities and wide-range labor demands beyond our territorial borders. Unfortunately, Mr. President, our existing legal framework is not adequate to protect our overseas labor force insofar as it concerns their access to Social Security benefits. For one, overseas Filipino workers face territorial or nationality-based restrictions which denies them access to such benefits. Many receiving states do not cover foreign workers under the Social Security schemes, leaving our workers with no access to basic safety nets while working abroad. In some instances, they are unable to accumulate enough insurance premium payment periods to qualify for full Social Security pensions, since the average requirement is about 20 to 40 years. Moreover, many employers face the risk of dual coverage or payment of double contributions when they send workers on a temporary basis to another country. Mr. President, my dear colleagues, labor protection should take the front line in this age of globalization. As we aim to develop robust and multifaceted relationship with other states and the rest of the world, we must likewise take steps to guarantee the full protection of our workers here and abroad. I therefore urge this chamber, Mr. President, to concur in the ratification of the agreement between Japan and the Republic of the Philippines on Social Security, which was signed on November 19, 2015, and ratified on January 12, 2017 by the President of the Republic. This agreement, Mr. President, will protect the social security rights of overseas Filipinos in Japan and will enable them to have access to social security benefits, including sickness, maternity, paternity, occupational diseases, invalidity, old age, and survivor's pension. To date, Mr. President, our country has signed social security agreements with Austria, the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland, Spain, France, Canada, Quebec, Switzerland, Belgium, Denmark, and the Netherlands. Our social security agreement with Portugal, which the Senate concurred in last May 2015, is now awaiting completion of Portugal's legal process prior to its entry in force. Similar to the social security agreements with other countries, the Philippine-Japan agreement contains standard provisions that are consistent and compliant with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and various international labor organization conventions. It also adopts and codifies the fundamental principles of international coordination of social security legislation, such as 1. Equality of treatment, which entitles the covered person in one state, his family members and survivors, to social security benefits under the same conditions as nationals of the other state. 2. Export of benefits, which allows covered persons to continue receiving his or her social security pension, whether he or she decides to reside in the Philippines or in Japan. 3. Totalization of periods of coverage, which allows the tacking of creditable periods of covered persons under the social security schemes of the Philippines and Japan to determine eligibility of benefits. Mr. President, according to the Department of Foreign Affairs and the Social Security System, the agreement will redound to the benefit of an estimated 377,233 Filipinos in Japan. It will likewise benefit the over 17,021 Japanese nationals presently in our country. Mr. President, clearly the agreement will not only further promote and strengthen our diplomatic relations with Japan, but more importantly, it will guarantee the necessary protection to our main economic drivers, our migrant workers. For these reasons and more, Mr. President, I urgently seek your support for the Senate's concurrence in the ratification of the agreement on social security between the Republic of the Philippines and Japan. Maraming salamat po.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we insert into the records the co-sponsorship speech of Senator Alan Cayetano for PS Resolution 283, Mr. President.
The co-sponsors, any objection? Any objection? There being none, the co-sponsorship speech of the Honorable Cayetano is hereby inserted into the record.
Thank you, Mr. President. To allow the members to study the proposed measure, I move that we suspend consideration of PS Resolution 283 under Committee Report Number 34.
Is there any objection? There being none, the period of interpellation is hereby suspended.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Tuesday, February 7, 2017.
Is there any objection? There being none, session is adjourned until 3 o'clock of February 7, 2017.